Hello, 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 everybody. This is Andrew Connell, your host for our office hours, my monthly office hours that I hold about this time every month on a monthly basis here on my YouTube channel. Want to welcome everybody who is joining us live on the live feed here. If you're new here, this is the first time that you've joined my office hours. I want to talk a little bit really quick about the logistics of kind of how I handle this, how this works, so you know what you can expect and to find out if this is really for you, if you want to continue to tune in with us. Let's just go ahead and just keep going on with our slides for just a minute here. Okay, so really quick. My name is Andrew Connell. I am a Microsoft 365 developer, a lot of experience with all of the different SharePoint development models we've had. I've been a longtime SharePoint developer going all the way back to September of 2003. Spent a lot of time in the last 7+ years in the SharePoint framework. Spending a lot more time these days in doing development around Microsoft Teams and SharePoint Embedded and Microsoft Graph and also Azure stuff. I still do a lot of SharePoint Framework stuff as well. I've got courses on the SharePoint Framework that you can learn about on my site, voitanos.io, and also some stuff related to Microsoft Teams as well. In fact, I just started my 4th cohort of my 2-month-long Microsoft Teams Accelerator to a handful of students. We just started that first lesson of that. Our first class of that was yesterday. So if you're interested in joining me with that one, drop a message in the chat or ping me privately, and I can still get you, potentially get you into the accelerator. Not potentially, I can still get you into the accelerator and you can watch the first class from yesterday as the live meeting. So just contact me if you are interested in that. I will ask, if for those of you who are joining me, if you would, in the chat, if you wouldn't mind just taking a second and let me know where you're dialing in from, where you're connecting from. Do it the same way that, well, if I can get it posted here. Oh, let me try and get this in here. There we go. The same way that I'm doing here, that I just did here in the chat, on the live stream. So introduce yourself. Tell me where you're connecting from. I'm here in St. John's, Florida, and I'd love to know where everybody else is who is connecting into the live stream. All right, so a little bit of logistics here. Let me talk a little bit about how we handle this, or how I handle this live stream. What I would ask all of you to do is to first, oh, look at that, that's all showing up. That's not how it's supposed to be, but whatever, it is. What I like to do with this is I like to focus on kind of covering what's new, what's changed, what's like some hot button stuff that I'm seeing in terms of news and stuff in the Microsoft 365 space. That's going to be inside of the SharePoint framework, inside of Microsoft Teams, Microsoft 365, these days now Copilot. I'll touch a little bit on that today as well. And then at the end, I try and spend a good amount of time at the end tackling questions. However, I have enough content to be able to fill up the entire hour, but what I will do is I'll definitely chop out more of the news and focus on questions based on the questions you guys, that all of you submit who are connecting here. I only receive one question from students ahead of time from a guy named Mike V, about tokens and getting a token and the SharePoint framework. I'll cover that during the office hours, but I want to make sure that if you also have questions, that I have plenty of time to answer your questions. So what I would ask is I'll go in, I'm going to drop in, I'm going to drop in the chat also another message here. If you wouldn't mind taking a second, if you've got a question, post it in the chat. That's the best way for me when the live stream's going on like this. It's the best way for me to see when a question comes up. If I see a bunch of questions show up, then I'll chop out some of the news and we'll focus more on questions, because that's the point of office hours. It's not here for me to kind of like try and teach. It's for to answer questions that you may have. Okay, so let's go. I see Bill. You've joined. Oh, Bill, I haven't seen you in a very long time here. It's cool to. I haven't seen you in a. Oh my goodness. Geez, it's been 12 hours since you touched SharePoint. That's great. Yeah, good to see you, Bill. We haven't connected in a long time. But yeah, Bill and I know each other from back in the I guess it was like my original days of SharePoint, Bill's original days of SharePoint. We spent a good amount of time at like doing a whole bunch of different stuff, and I guess battle scars to prove it, right? So anyway, good to see you, man. So let me talk a little bit here about, first we'll touch on the SharePoint framework. So with this, I do a little bit of a state of the union. Where are we? What's going on? The most current version of the SharePoint framework that is in production, is generally available, is version 1.19. 1.19 included a couple things. Specifically, they bumped to Webpack 5. They also have a new adaptive card template for adaptive card extensions. Sorry, they have a new template for adaptive card extensions, which works in both SharePoint Online and Viva connections. And this is for doing data visualizations. That the line chart with being able to have multiple series that you see there on the screen, that's the big updates in 1.19. There's really not much else. They did bump to Webpack 5, which is nice, which is a little, it's kind of catching up with some dependencies, but there's not really much else there. Unless you're looking, there's not many things that I've seen like big bug fixes or anything that's really critical to be on the latest and greatest version of the SharePoint framework. The next thing that I wanted to touch on, though, is the next version that's coming. This next version that's coming is 1.20. They've dropped a beta and a release candidate for it. This one, very much like the last one that I just mentioned, it's very small. There's not a whole lot of stuff here. As I'm talking through this stuff, I'm going to drop links in the chat. Well, that didn't work. Let's try this one more time. So I'll drop one for SPFx 1.19. And then let me grab another one here for SPFx 1.20. 1.20 for the release notes for that one as well. There we go. So I just dropped those two links in the chat from the last two slides. These are the big change that we have here, or the two big things that are important with this. And when I say big, I mean, it's like there's not a whole lot here. They're both related to adaptive cards and the adaptive card extensions. So what they've done is they are extending the data visualization template that we got in the last version of SharePoint Framework, the current production one, 1.19, that only supported line charts, which are the first two that you see in the screenshot here on the slide. But then you also see, let me get me out of the way so you can see all of them. You can also see here a couple other options. We've got a pie chart, a bar chart, and a donut chart are different types of charts that we can also use in this. So that's the other updates that they've added for this. In the link that you see there on the slide, the one that I dropped in the chat here, let's just get me out of here for a second. There is a link to an article on that release, on those release notes that I've updated for Microsoft. That's being used that's got some examples of how you can update your data visualization to use these different chart types. Another thing that we've got is the quick view is now has another option that we can use for implementation of our adaptive card extensions. So just as a quick recap, in a adaptive card extension, one of the things that it has is a card view, and the card view is like the default view that you see on the screen. And then from there, you can have actions on the card view. So when you click on a button in the card view, it's kind of like a dialogue. It opens up like a dialogue off to the side, and that's called the quick view. And before, we've only been able to put an adaptive card in that quick view. But one of the changes that they're adding for 1.20 is they're giving us the ability for that quick view to contain HTMLs. And the code for that looks very similar to implement this. This code looks very similar to like a web part where you're getting a render method that you can specify and it'll render it right inside of that quick view. Now that's interesting because if it's just an HTML view that's going there and I can have a render method that I can go through and render stuff out, that implies, it looks like too, it's just going to be a div, which means now our quick views can actually contain React apps, which is kind of cool. So we can build a full-blown app that gives us a lot more control over the UX on how things are going to be displayed. I see a question here from Bill that said, can you explain how does this compare to just simply embedding Power BI widgets on web pages? Power BI widgets is another option for doing this, and you're going to have a heck of a lot more options. That's all driven based on live data. These options here are for like the quick views, for ACEs. The difference that we're going to have is that, and Don, yeah, I know the audio is a little out of sync. I thought I had fixed it, and it's not, obviously. When I go to just screen and me putting me in a picture-in-picture, it's it looks like it might not be in sync again. It was in sync, and now all of a sudden something changed. So sorry about that. That's my side. That's not YouTube's side. It's this crazy thing with like the offset and everything, and trying to syncing the offset. I had it fixed, and then all of a sudden I did a webinar I did 2 webinars in the last week, and something got screwed up. And I thought I fixed it again, and obviously, and I tested it earlier before I did this, and it didn't do it. So my bad. Anyway, here, I'll keep that so you can let's just do this then. So you can't see that as much. So Bill, the other thing that's a little bit different from a adaptive card extension from a Power BI piece is that these adaptive card extensions, it's going to show us the chart, but then if I want to see, like, open this up to do more data with this. So let's say this is going to be the card view that you see here with the data visualization on it. Below the actual visualization, I can have actions, so other buttons, and when I select one of those buttons, it opens up like a little dialog that maybe shows even more data, or I can slice and dice it. Using this other capability we have with like an ACE quick view, that would allow me to maybe even have like a React app or put like a D3 chart in there that allows me to do even more stuff with that data, to see like, see it as a report version, or be able to see like a breakdown on like the one that's in the middle, the stock price, or sales by category. I can look and see like, here's the sales by category from these different months, but then it would maybe like break it down a little bit more for me. So I don't know. I mean, it's a different way of doing it. The data on Power BI is probably going to be able to pull from a lot of different sources. The data in an adaptive card extension is going to allow me as a developer to go pull data from wherever I want to pull it from and show it. So maybe I can have more filtering capabilities and stuff like that. Maybe more of a mashup. Of course, you could do all that stuff with Power BI. The big thing here is that, like with Power BI, these are not the Power BI widgets that you're going to add. They aren't going to be able to go on these dashboard pages where adaptive cards can go, or adaptive card extensions can go. They're only going to go on a page that supports like web parts. So that's another big difference. Okay, let's jump on to the next topic here, and let's look at what was the next thing I was going to talk about? I forget. Here's a big one. This is a really big one here. I'm going to get me out of the way, and let me grab the link for this to put this in the chat. Let's see. So I'll drop this link in the chat. This one is a big one. So you may be familiar with a management shell, PowerShell management shell from the Patterns and Practices group for doing administrative-like stuff on your Microsoft 365 tenant. And on like your SharePoint Framework projects, and it does a whole bunch of stuff. There is also a command line interface, the CLI for Microsoft 365, which is also very popular. It's my preference because the PowerShell one doesn't work cross-platform, or doesn't work well on cross-platform. Some stuff does, some stuff doesn't. But anyway, I prefer using a CLI. I'm not an administrator, so I hate PowerShell. I don't use PowerShell. I'm not a fan. That's just my preference, though. Regardless, both of these, in order for these to work, you used to have to grant an Intra ID or Azure AD application access to your tenant. Microsoft decided in this year of the Great Lockdown, or they like to call it their Security First Initiative, which is not a bad thing, but I mean, a lot of stuff they're locking down and they're not giving people much of a notice or any chance to really go through and to make their changes. This one was, in my opinion, really poorly rolled out. I mean, somebody made a decision this, they brought the hammer down, and they didn't give people hardly any warning at all with this. And Microsoft will disagree with it, but I mean, it was really poorly rolled out. Just came across really fast. Anyway, what Microsoft decided to do is they looked at it and they said, hey, wait a minute, this Intra ID application that we have that we are responsible for, being Microsoft, we've created this as a multi-tenant application, and we're letting the community use this application to go make changes in other people's tenants. Yeah, that's a little bit of not so much the security first initiative kind of a thing that we're trying to go with here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and delete that. And we're going to tell the people who do the PnP management shell or the CLI for Microsoft 365, they're going to have to update this to not use the Intra ID application that we created. Instead, you're going to have to go create your own in your own tenant, and then those different implementations, either the PnP management shell or the CLI for 365, they're going to have to ship new versions that allow customers to use their own Intra ID application. Okay, big picture with this is probably a good thing that they did this. This is probably a good thing so that you are only going to use an Intra ID application that you have to create and that you're giving your own users in your organization with the appropriate permissions to be able to do this stuff instead of using the one that Microsoft provides. That's probably a better thing. The part that sucks about this is the way they rolled it out, because they just out of the blue one weekend decided they're going to do this. And on September the 9th, they deleted the application. So now if you weren't paying attention to the news, or you didn't tune in to my office hours or my newsletter, my biweekly newsletter that called this out as well, if you weren't paying attention to this and you're going to go use the PnP management shell or the CLI for 365, you're getting this access denied error and you can't figure out what's going on and what changed because your passwords haven't changed. This is why. So you need to upgrade to the latest versions, and you need to go through and to then go through and follow the instructions to get updated. The link that I've got there is a blog post that's on the PnP blog that explains how to deal with this. It did not go out through official channels effectively. I think after the fact, they tried to put something in the message center, but they did not do this through official channels because they kind of looked at it and said, well, these are community-based projects. They're not Microsoft-supported projects, so here's the deal. I know I might get a little bit of trouble for this one, but this is just one of those things where it's just like, I don't know. We all say, we all keep hearing that like the Patterns and Practices group is all 100% community-based, but clearly Microsoft likes to put their finger on the scale a couple times when it comes to stuff that they don't like here. So it's on one side when it fits them, they'll say like, no, Patterns and Practices, it's all like a community-based thing, and it's great for the community, and it's not all Microsoft stuff, and they spearhead it. But in other times they like to say, yeah, but Microsoft has really got their finger, is really kind of has their hands in the stuff behind the scenes. So I don't know. Take it for what it's worth. I just want to make sure that you're aware of this. Another thing that was big this past week was the Copilot Wave 2 announcements. You guys may have seen these. I'll drop a Copilot Wave 2. I'll drop a link in the chat for this as well. These are, I mean, this was it was an event that you can, the link at the bottom, the link I just put in the chat. The link is going to take you to the blog post that mentions all of these and little video that includes also videos that shows you what these things are and the changes, what the changes are. The big changes here are the Copilot and Microsoft 365 apps. So they talked about some improvements that are coming in Word, Excel, Outlook, PowerPoint, and Teams. A lot of stuff that looks like vaporware right now. A lot of stuff that I'm not seeing in my apps. So a lot of stuff that are like, it's coming. Looks like to me that we're still in this AI race and everyone wants to talk about what they're going to do instead of like what they've shipped. So to me, this was very much a marketing event this past Monday. I'm not diminishing it, but I'm just like, take it for what it's worth, that a lot of stuff is, okay, I see the teasers, but there's this whole conference keynote thing where sometimes it's like going, hey, it's coming and this is what we're working on. I'd like to kind of hear about stuff when it's shipped and when it's live, or at least in beta, and tell me it's in beta so I can actually play with it. Another one that they added was this Copilot Pages. This is new. What Copilot Pages is a way for us to, let me pull my little laser pointer around here, make it easier to see. There we go. So what Copilot Pages is I found it interesting that when they talked about this, they didn't call out exactly what it was. effectively what it is you can go do a Copilot prompt and then kind of publish the prompt or save the experience to another page that everybody can collaborate on, which it sure looks like Loop, but I can't tell you, like, every single person that I talked to after this, they're like, that's cool. It's like Copilot with like Google Docs. And I was like, oh my God, that's not the message that Microsoft wants to have come across. I went back and watched the announcements a second time, and I don't think I ever saw them use the word loop and say it was actually a loop component or it's a loop page. But whatever. I mean, that's pretty much what it is. The other thing here are these naming changes. Classic Microsoft marketing to coming up with new names for stuff. And I mean, in one sense, who cares, right? That they rename some of this. But I mean, in another sense, it's like, man, just come on, pick a name early on and don't wait to the end to change it. I don't know. It's kind of a pain in the butt to me. So we used to call these things, and when I say used to, I mean like in May when they were all kind of shared at the Build conference. We had these things called declarative copilots. Now they're called declarative agents for Microsoft 365. We had custom engine copilots. Now they're called custom engine agents for Microsoft 365. And then, you know, when you go to use Copilot, like the work Copilot inside of Teams, that was called Copilot for Microsoft 365. But now it's called Business Chat, or otherwise known Biz Chat, which, I mean, okay. But like Biz Chat, really? I mean, is this like the informal, like, it kind of sounds to me, it sounds a lot more like the informal orchestration engine, because the more formal one was Biz Talk that, you know, Microsoft had years ago. So, I mean, it was literally a product name. So, I don't know, whatever. Biz Talk, was it personal chat and Piz Talk? Is that what it's, Piz Chat and Business personal chat? I can't say it even so much. So what is the one that we have on Bing? I mean, it's like, oh, it's personal. So is it personal chat and purse chat? I don't know. It's inconsistent. So the only thing that's consistent in life, right? Death, taxes, Microsoft renaming crap. But whatever. Anyway, it's just a renaming thing. So is it really that big of a deal? I shouldn't even be making as big of a deal about it, but I am. And whatever. It's kind of a roll your eyes kind of a thing. Okay. Couple other bits and bobs that I want to throw out there. What issues are we seeing that are trending with this? Here's the first one. So let's just do issue, what is that, 9514. This one, quite frankly, is kind of crappy. What Microsoft did, I mentioned this last time, I'm seeing even bigger issues from this since then from some of my customers. So Microsoft was rolling out the new List UI. And you can tell it's new UI if you've got the new UI in your tenant. If you go to a list or a document library, and where you normally see like the different views, they now have like a tabbed interface in the top right corner. If you were a SharePoint Framework developer that had created a SharePoint Framework extension, a field customizer extension, or a command set extension, those didn't work. They just flat out didn't work. In the new UI. And it pretty much looks like Microsoft decided they just completely didn't even test that scenario. And they didn't load them or anything. Enough people complained about it in this issue that is strangely now closed and marked as completed, although it's not fixed. So it's the strangest way of dealing with an issue list. That this is what the SharePoint Framework team has done in the past too. They basically say that when they acknowledge a problem and they fix the bug before they've even rolled it out, they just say it's completed. It's like, no, how about we do it like the way that like the Azure status dashboard or the Microsoft 365 status dashboard, how those work, which is we know there's an issue, we're mitigating it, and until it's rolled out, the issue has not been resolved. But these guys choose to do it a different way. So it doesn't make sense to me. It basically communicates to customers that, hey, the issue's been fixed, which it has not. Effectively, what they've done is they now have code that runs and says, if you have a field customizer or a command set extension, then you get the old List UI where that stuff still works. Otherwise, you get the new List UI. And we'll fix the new List UI so that stuff works in the new List UI eventually. I don't know what they haven't shared, or I haven't at least seen anything about timing with that. So it's a little crappy. Now they're telling us to, if you see other issues, then post them in the issue list as separate issues for it. So it's the exact inverse of how I see a lot of issues by other repos and like that accept public issue lists are deal with stuff. So it's just how they deal with it. I will tell you that I've seen more issues around this too. So I've got a customer where we're seeing if you have app customizers, if you have two app customizers on the same page in the new list UI, the first one loads and works and the second one doesn't. And I can prove this by having two app customizers in a project. Both of them have different sequence numbers in the registration. So sequence 100, sequence 200. And then one of them writes to the top placeholder and one of them writes to the bottom placeholder. And when you go through every page in SharePoint, they both show up until you get to new list UI, and then the bottom placeholder never shows up. So, oops. Yeah, I'm trying to get my customer to log that one since they're the ones that are experiencing it. But it's another issue. It's just it's a quality thing that that was an oversight on at Microsoft. It's like the SharePoint Framework team and the list UI team. They weren't talking to each other, which is unfortunate because that's an issue that they should be able to figure out. And to us as customers, it should not matter. It's all Microsoft. It's all Microsoft 365. The fact that there's different teams, that's a they problem. That's not an us problem. The other thing that is new, it's out is, and I want to get a little bit of a call out on this too, because there are some people that are running into some issues with this a little bit from what I've seen in the issue list. Microsoft rolled out the SharePoint Brand Center, which is a new, like a site template type thing that allows you to define, among other things, it allows you to define custom fonts in your site collection. Or in your tenant. So you can create one brand center for your tenant, and you can define like what fonts are used for different types of different places throughout your SharePoint environment. You can now, as a SharePoint Framework developer, you can also leverage these custom fonts that have been selected in the tenant where your app runs. You can also choose to use those fonts that have been selected in the brand center for where the tenant is, where your application is being used, by using these little like placeholders or these little tokens, CSS variables and tokens. There's a way to do this. I wrote a blog post about it, kind of shows a little bit how this works, and then I referenced an article that I wrote in the SharePoint developer docs that has a table that explains all of the different places and tokens that you can use to use this in your environment. I just caution you, I've seen a couple places where like some default stuff doesn't work. And so the article that I wrote and the article in the developer docs, you do want to have, like, when you define the font, you set the font family style on a class where you use those variables, you want to put two variables in. Yours that you want to use from the brand center, and then the second one being like a fallback. Because if you don't use the fallback, then it can do a fallback that you don't expect. So that's a big thing there. There's a couple open issues in the issue list that actually call this out. Okay, next up, what do we got here? Oh, that's it. Let me put those brand center links in the chat. So brand center. I'm just going to put my article on here, because my article for the article that's in the SharePoint developer docs is linked from at the beginning of my article, so then you can get both of them. Okay, so now I want to tackle a couple questions. I'm curious if Mike is on the call, Mike V, if you're on the call and you've joined us live, because I'm going to call your question out. You posted it in the list to post questions ahead of time, so hopefully you're joining us. Okay, so we got about 30 minutes left. I only have one outstanding question. So if anybody else has any questions, post them in the chat. Otherwise, this one could be a quick office hours. I'm not going to fill it up just to fill it up if nobody's got questions. So the way you do it is go to just drop a question in the chat in the YouTube and the live stream chat, and I'll tackle those that show up. Here's the only question I have though. This one's from Mike. Let's get me over here. So Mike asked, he was looking for a way using the Microsoft Graph Client v3 that SharePoint gives us to be able to get access to the Graph access token that was generated. So the reason why he wants to do this is he wants to basically take the access token. He wants to inspect the scopes that are in the access token to detect if the user if the user or if the access token that you get back has the necessary scopes that have been granted to it. So if they haven't, then he wants to be able to notify the user saying something like, hey, the admin hasn't granted these scopes yet. Go talk to your admin to go do this stuff. So I originally thought he was using it for debugging, and in my response to him, I was like, well, you can always just open up the dev tools and see the token that comes back or the token that's used. But he wants to do this live. So the way that the SharePoint framework has done this is that they don't, specifically for the Graph client, they don't expose the access token. They get the access token, and then they turn around and they initialize the JavaScript SDK for the Microsoft Graph using that access token, so you don't have to do it. And then they give you back an instance of the Graph client, so you can have the Fluent API kind of feel and everything to it. The other option for doing this, though, is that, and this is frankly is my preference for working with Graph, is instead you can use the Azure AD HTTP client to basically make calls straight to get a access token for Microsoft Graph, and then you get a client back that is pre-configured to always include that access token that has been granted, that's been configured by the tenant admin, will always be sent in a request over to your targeted secure endpoint. So in my case, or in this case, Graph, and that token will be in the authorization header as a bearer token with every request. That's just done for you by the Graph client. But in Mike's case, Mike wants that access token. So one of the things you can use is a thing called the Azure AD Token Provider Factory. That's also part of the SharePoint Framework API. So I've got a little code snippet at the bottom how you could do that. What you would end up doing is you would first go get a token provider, and then you would ask Microsoft, you would ask the SharePoint Framework, or using that provider, to go get an access token for a particular endpoint. And in this case here, you can see I'm asking for the access token for graph.microsoft.com. And now I have the access token. And now I can do what Mike was asking for. I could take that access token. I should validate it. But there's a level of trust that I think that you have to decide how trustworthy you're going to be in saying that, well, once that access token comes back, I'm going to make sure that that access token is either is or is not valid. And then I'm going to go ahead and look at the contents or the claims inside of the access token. And specifically, it's looking for the SCP claim, which stands for scopes, which is a space delimited list of all of the scopes that that endpoint has been, that the SharePoint Online Intra ID application that all of us have inside of our SharePoint Online tenants. I think it's called the SharePoint Online Web Client Extensibility Principle, something like that. It's a long name. A tenant admin has to grant a permission to that app. They can do that through the SharePoint Admin Center. And then once they've done that, then when you get an access token back, it'll have those scopes in it. And then you can do whatever you want with it. In my opinion with this, do you really need to validate the token in this specific scenario? I'd say no if you're calling the Graph client. If you're calling the Microsoft Graph. The reason why is because if you are going to check the token to make sure that it's got the right scopes, even if someone tampered with the token, if you then go to use that token to call Graph, it's not going to work because the token's digital signature is not going to match the key that was used, the private public key that was used. the private key that was used by Enter ID to sign it. So if you use the public key to try and validate the signature, it's going to fail. Even if it fails, it doesn't really matter, or even if it passes or fails, it doesn't matter, because that if you use that access token to call Graph is already going to validate the token. So is it really important to validate it client side? I don't think so. I think it's extra work that's really not necessary. That's just my take on it, though. So it's up to you. Yeah. So that's my answer for Mike. So what I would do, if you want to do this, Mike, is I wouldn't use the Graph client. I would go get this access token, and I would use that to do the check and to notify the user of what you're looking for. And then you have two options. You can either then go use the Graph client, but that's going to require another round trip to go get the access token, although I think it might be cached once you get it. So may not be a performance issue. You can use an Azure AD HTTP client to go get a configured AAD client using the access token. Or, as I would do it, I just use the HTTP client, and I would update the request to include the authorization header, the authorization header value using the access token that you got here. And then you don't have to do another round trip or anything like that. There's nothing that makes the HTTP client any better or worse than any of those other options, the Graph client or the Azure AD HTTP client, or even the SharePoint Framework client, the SharePoint REST API client. All of them are all based on the HTTP client. The only one that's not is the Graph one, because the Graph one is the JavaScript SDK that the Microsoft Graph team publishes. What the SharePoint Framework team does in that MS Graph Client v3 is that they go get an access token and then they configure it using this access token. You could do that too if you wanted to do that, and you could initialize it yourself. I think it's the graph.initialize, and you have to pass in an object, and it has a single property on it called auth provider. So then you have to create an auth provider for the Graph client, and you can give it this token that you received. So you've got options. You can totally do what you're wanting to do, though. It's really just what it comes down to how you want to solve that problem. Okay. Anybody else got a question? Because I'm all out of questions. I didn't see anything pop up in the chat. I saw some comments about the Brain Center. But one thing about the Brain Center, it is in preview. So using those custom fonts, though, that is also in preview. Although I don't want to say that's not going to change, but I doubt it's going to change. But they are getting some feedback and collecting feedback for changes that they want to make, some updates that they can make to Brand Center. So if you've got feedback, then definitely give them, submit that feedback back to Microsoft. I would do it like maybe I would look in the posts for Brand Center where it was announced and provide your feedback there instead of doing it at the SharePoint Framework docs, because I think that the Brand Center team is going to be more interested to get that feedback direct on Brand Center. But just know it is in preview, so stuff could and probably will change. What will change? I don't know. So, does anybody else have any other questions that they would like to ask related to SharePoint Framework, Microsoft Graph, Microsoft Teams, Copilot, or Microsoft 365, or anything related to our office hours? While you're thinking of that, I'd love to get some feedback on something. The office hours this month, I had to change the date of it from Wednesday to Thursday, and I've had to do that a couple times in the past because I teach my Microsoft Teams accelerator is on Mondays and Wednesdays during the same time that we have our office hours that I normally do, which is I normally have done it on the third Wednesday of the month. So I had to move it when I'm doing those accelerators, which last 8 weeks. I've had to move it to I've pushed it usually to Thursday. And now that I'm starting another one, I'm going to have to do this again for the next two ones that we do. I'd rather just be consistent with the date. So I'm playing with one of two things. The office hours going forward are either going to be on Tuesdays or Thursdays. Today, it's on a Thursday, September the 19th. But the next one is going to be on a Tuesday, October the 15th. My tentative plan is to simply move the office hours to Tuesdays, the third Tuesday of the month at 11 a.m. Eastern time. If you think that it should be on Thursday, let me know. Just let me know. We'll see. I can, I'm happy to go through and to take input from it. But right now, without any input, the office hours is probably going to be on Thursday, like you see. On Tuesday, like you see here. Why? There we go. Stay. So that's when the next one's going to be. The next one's already been published. It's already up, so you can go renew for the office hours, or you can go get notified via YouTube. An email reminder does get sent out. If you're on my email list, there's a way that you can manage your subscription, and you can opt in to get notified the week prior that the office hours is coming up. I only send one email. I don't want to blast everybody with a bunch of stuff, because I also give people a way to download like an ICS file for it as well, to go get the calendar invite for it. But yeah, so office hours on Tuesday at 11 a.m. Of course, and that'll be the third Tuesday of the month. Of course, that could change too. And now that I'm looking at October 15th, I wonder if that is the third Tuesday of the month. The third Wednesday of the month was October 16th. So I just moved it up one day. This one will be on October the 15th. And then I will switch it to being like the third Tuesday after that. So unless you get feedback, let me know. Let me know by dropping a comment in the live stream or in the comments if you're watching the recording of this to give me your feedback. The next one will definitely be on October the 15th. But beyond that, I'm open to feedback. The time of it is not going to change. It will be at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And the reason why I choose 11 a.m. is that's the date, that's the time that I'm just I'm standing on the shoulders of giants with this one. Whenever Microsoft does a worldwide event that is like a webinar type thing that they want to do, it is always at 11 a.m. The 11 a.m. is just the time that it hits the most people in the world during daylight hours. I fully acknowledge that those of you in Oceania, like Asia, Australia, New Zealand, I fully understand that for those of you, it's not an ideal time for you. But again, we're going with the biggest number of people that are during daylight hours that we can go for with this. So I'm just following what Microsoft does with this. That's why I choose 11 a.m. Yeah. So at any rate, that's it. Yeah. So I don't see any questions here. I see a couple people saying like, I don't really care about the time. Either's fine. I do see, Don, I see you saying that Thursdays are better for you because it means to schedule sprint reviews. I mean, I get it. Like right now I have a standing Thursday meeting at the exact same time, or that's right at the end of this as well. So I'm trying not to have things that get butted up to each other. But I mean, if a lot of people say that Thursdays is better, I mean, I can be flexible with that. So recruit people to push to go to a different day. Right now though, it's going to be Tuesdays. So I know we only have 10, 15 people that are on the webinar right now. So we'll see if I get more feedback from it. Bill wants 3 a.m. Eastern sessions, please. Cool. That'll be great. It'll be a black stream, meaning like no camera and no audio. I won't be there. That won't happen. Awesome. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. I am Yeah, so Don, I see that about the PMP call. Problem is, the PMP calls, there are a million of those every single week. And if I do it on Thursdays, I'm going to overlap another PMP call. So I am not going to concern myself with the PMP calls. They have so many community calls. It is impossible not to conflict with those. I'm just going to have to do mine when I can. Plus, this one's about like Microsoft 365 development, which is very much the one that they do on Thursdays. Every other Thursday, so I'd probably conflict with that as well, and that's more of a direct compete than doing a PMP call on Tuesday. So it's impossible to try. They have a monopoly on all the calls that they try and set. So I'm not gonna try and compete with. I'm never gonna try and go through and figure out which is which. So yeah, I'm not doing back to back with their call because I know that people won't tune into both of them. So, all right. With that, here's the thing. My priority with the call is to make sure that, number one, I can do it and I can have a set day that is consistent. And with my teaching schedule, I don't want to have to keep moving it around to accommodate my teaching schedule. I'm sure things will have to move every once in a while, but I'm going with my time. I'm not going to try and worry too much about what everybody else. There's a million different webinars that are out there, and trying to go through and getting all of us to coordinate. I'm not playing that game. So that's why mine's recorded as a YouTube live stream that's available right away. Whereas theirs is all on Teams, and then you have to wait for them to go upload it somewhere and publish it. So, anyway, awesome. Ha. Awesome. Well, hey, everybody, thank you very much for joining today. I don't see any other questions here. I don't want to just keep it just to keep it, so I'll go ahead and wrap it up early. I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of their week. And if you've got any questions in the future, post them in our Discord group. There's a link in the show notes or in the notes under this video where and for future webinars where you can go and you can post a question early. My students, the reason I do it that way is so my students who also have access to the office hours channel in my Discord, that way you guys, they can ask questions and my students always get the priority on their questions. But then as you see, sometimes we don't get a whole bunch of questions and we can always get caught up. So with that, thank you very much for joining me today. I hope everyone has a great rest of the week. I will see you hopefully next time. Bye, everybody.